Hi, I'm Susan Morse, Senior Editor with HIMSS Media. Welcome and thank you for attending today's webinar, Sentara Healthcare Accelerates its Data Strategy through Azure Cloud, sponsored by SecureLink. For healthcare organizations, overcoming challenges around clinical gaps in care, interoperability, data security, and regulatory compliance are critical to success. Healthcare technology leaders need to leverage cloud-based solutions to create a unified data ecosystem and develop a well-defined data governance process to make accurate decisions and enhance performance. Today, you'll learn how Sentara Healthcare, a leading health system in Virginia, partnered with Sidious Tech and Microsoft to build a robust enterprise data warehouse on Azure to address key data management challenges across the organization. Our speakers for today are Sam Owens, Director of Enterprise Data Services at Sentara Health, Sean Remackle, Director of Health and Life Sciences at Microsoft, and Jeffrey Springer, Senior Vice President of Product Management at Sidious Tech. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jeff to begin our presentation.
Yep, thanks, Susan. So just as we go through our agenda here, I'm going to talk about how big data EDWs for healthcare providers is changing and how people are thinking about it. Then Sean will go next and talk about the building a big data platform on Microsoft Azure. And then Sam really will cover the part of the conversation with how he's done and his success story at Sentara. Just in way of background, let me give you my background just for a minute. So I lead the product strategy at Sidious Tech. My background is about 20 plus years in healthcare IT, been with Sidious for 4. Prior to this, I led Siemens Analytics Division. So like Sam, focused on provider side work there. Before that, I was with MedDecision, led their product management strategy, more payer-based care management, and then before that I was with McKesson, where I led an innovation center connecting payers and providers together. So little clinical, little financial, little payer, little provider, which actually is where healthcare is moving today, and this conversation is a lot about that. So with that, let's talk about where's the industry moving on the concepts of cloud, on EDW, and frankly, that's why you're all here today, is this is where the industry is moving. You want to hear what's going on. We see tremendous movement. CIOs are looking at it more and more, greater adoption. People are spending money, moving to cloud, moving to big data, and we see that resoundingly payers, providers, getting more comfortable in that. One, the volumes of healthcare data are growing. There's more flexibility in these environments, and the innovation that's being spent across the industry is fairly tremendous and allows the healthcare industry to leverage the technologies and industry's innovation that's going on there. So that's more motherhood and apple pie. As we go to what are the challenges around this for CXOs, we're talking about a change in strategy. So you have to take into consideration what's going on from a regulatory perspective. Clearly, where the government goes, healthcare goes, so you have to make sure they're compliant and budgets are tight. And so doing that within the investment dollars given to the organizations is important. As we look at healthcare data is an ugly, nasty place. We've been trying to standardize healthcare data for 20 plus years that I've seen. We're closer and closer, but still is difficult, and migrating that healthcare data to this new platform and making sure that it is clean to answer the questions is important. Then from a resource perspective, not all of our customers, all healthcare organizations are located in Silicon Valley. They're spread throughout the country, and getting skilled resources to do this, and these new platforms require new technology skills is important. And then the last one, and definitely not the least, maybe at the top, is security. So you don't want to end up on the news with data breaches, security breaches, and things like that. So healthcare has been a little reluctant to go to the cloud in the past due to that one issue. Then one of the key things that happens is sitting in the chief data officer's chair, she has a dilemma almost every day. So a business user comes to them and says, hey, I want to integrate this new business app into our organization. I need to do it in the next 3 months. Where do you get the data from? Short-term business needs require fast solutions. So your long-term data strategy is going to take more than 3 months to get there, and this integration has to be done quickly for the business. And so they make trade-offs, short-term versus long-term, on integrating those solutions in. And these trade-offs end up with a very disintermediated view of technology where you have multiple systems that do the same thing. So I did an analysis for one fairly large IDN, and I saw that they had multiple quote-unquote enterprise data warehouses. If you have multiple, they're probably not enterprise at that point in time, but then multiple metric engines where they were calculating healthcare metrics for a number of different things, and multiple ETL tools. And this ended up with more and more confusion across the organization, as business users then didn't know where to go to get their answers, because answers were in different systems, and technologists then couldn't keep up with the integration points across those. So this dilemma by the chief data officer is very real, and they live this day to day. As you're thinking about going to cloud, there's a few things to take into consideration. First is your organization. So some of the things that I talked about: budget, resources, appetite, security risk, things like that. And you can either do this, in a small step, one at a time, or dive in head first here, and understanding your users, the scale at which you want to do this, the types of resources you have to have available. Sometimes the business case jumps out at you, and I'm going to point towards Sam's part of the presentation where really his strategy made a lot of sense for their overall organization, but then also making sure from a resources perspective you have those lined up. And so these are really 4 key considerations that you have to take as you're starting to enter in this decision. But there are different ways to do it, and it's the dip the toe in the water versus head first dive strategy that you can take. Now, along those lines, the dip the toe in the water can be, I want to bring all that data together, but start to get value out of things for smaller initiatives. So you can do this in stages where you really have a series of sub-goals within your overall larger goal. So the chief data officer can combine that long-term strategic initiative and the short-term need of integrating in those business goals that individuals within the organization are bringing. And so one of our customers were bringing together, multiple EMRs of data. It ended up being over 100,000 fields total, but what they did was they landed the data alone, but then only curated a small fraction of that, 2 or 3% of that data to drive operational value out of that, and did that in a much faster period of time. And you could add capabilities over time. Customizing your strategy depends not only on, what is the business value you're getting at. Clearly, business users can have different questions there, but then also what foundational components do you have? So every organization has some data strategy coming into this, whether they wanted to reshape that data strategy wholesale or leverage some of their existing assets are important questions there that you can ask in building your own strategy out. In terms of the value proposition, this is becoming more and more clear with the investments that different organizations. So Citius Tech has a product, but ours works in an integrated way with Microsoft, as we're talking here, but others as well. This is an area where lots of companies are making investments, but being able to bring together all of your data, and this isn't just, hey, clinical and financial data, which is conversations of yesterday, the psychosocial, even social media data that's available. You hear new statistics every day that where people can predict things based on your Facebook posts or the weather or things like that. So that data has become more important. And how do you create a long-term strategy around that? How do you save costs? So cost is an interesting thing. From you have hard costs to spend on hardware, integration, things like that, but then also the supportability, resources, and cost to the organization of having disintermediate strategy versus a single strategy and creating that enterprise approach. Data security, this will always be a front page issue when it's a problem, staying out in front of it, having the industry at your back, so the Microsoft, Citius Techs of the world, protecting your data security is integral, and it means that it's not just you standing there alone trying to make sure that that's right. And then creating the right resource mix and data strategy so that when that business user comes to you and say, hey, I want to integrate this, you already have that data and can supply it to them. It's not a matter of bringing it together and curating it, and you can stand on your own shoulders over time. So in terms of Microsoft and Citius Tech, we've been working together for 10 plus years. People can create different types of partnerships with Microsoft, and clearly Microsoft is a national and world recognized leading company. Their platform is leading cloud platform with Azure. But we also work with them at a product level. So we've got products that are on their certified apps platform and integrated, and you'll hear how Sentara used both of our technologies together to help accelerate their vision around this. In terms of that key value proposition, faster time to value, incredibly important. Getting the data curated into one solution, having it be flexible for the future. So flexibility for the future is two things. One is technology flexibility. If you go back 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, technologies change very fast, especially in this new world. Having a Microsoft, a Citius Tech at your back to help with that is incredibly powerful. But also healthcare changes all the time. So every 5 to 10 years, there's a new strategy in healthcare. We all would have guesses at it, but we know that shift will come because healthcare is constantly trying to improve. CMS is doing different things to drive that type of improvement, payers, providers as well. Having the domain experience around healthcare and then driving ROI into that are all critically important. So just so you have a sense of Citius Tech, clearly everybody knows Microsoft. Just 2 seconds on Citius Tech. We're a 15-year-old company focused solely on healthcare, $200 million in revenue a year, and we've got one of the highest NPS scores in the nation. If you don't know the NPS score, it's a rating of our customer satisfaction. Average scores are 5 to 10. Our score is 69. So we're focused on healthcare solely. We're focused on the technology success of our customers, and we've been around for a while now. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sean, and he can take the next section on how Microsoft helps to drive our customer success.
Thank you, Jeff. Hi, I'm Sean Raymackle. I'm the Director for Health Solutions for Microsoft Health and Life Sciences. I've been with Microsoft 12 years. Most of my responsibilities are helping our senior health decision makers that I work with understand how Microsoft can facilitate their business, clinical, and IT objectives on the Microsoft platform. Been with Microsoft, again, 12 years, all in the health and life sciences space, and 10 years before that, I was a CIO for a hospital system in North Carolina. So what I want to do today is give you a little flavor for how Microsoft sees big data and analytics in the healthcare space, and just touch on some of the business issues here that are at hand. As many of you on the webinar probably know firsthand, there's a lot of pressure to deliver excellent care with high quality outcomes, and that's never been greater in the space. I go back quite a long time, and the pressure is incrementally higher than it was back then. And overlaying all these primary goals are a wide range of financial, regulatory, labor demands that constrain the ability of healthcare systems to successfully meet their mission. And then when you add in technological, genomic, medical advances, these demand on your healthcare leaders are pushing them to assimilate a lot of key information to make better and faster decisions. So really the essence of the business problem. So the next part is really how Microsoft sort of sees an evolution in healthcare solutions. Information technology in health for the past 10 years has largely been in the investment, implementation, and maintaining of electronic medical records, right? And so in working with health providers, Microsoft is seeing that our customers want to evolve beyond a system of record. That's been great work, laid a strong foundation, but we want to move to systems of insight and systems of engagement that can begin to address demands of the healthcare continuum that we saw on the previous slide, right? So developing actionable insights and predictions across the provider data state is now seen as a key component to enable quick and cost-effective decision-making by healthcare leaders. And that's not just in operations, but also in patient care. And in addition, we also see that collaboration and communication for physicians and providers is a critical component to successfully delivering the proactive health that we want to see in the new health models that are being advanced today in the quality care environment. And then lastly, for Microsoft, we really truly believe that a robust free flow of information driven by interoperability, and specifically the FHIR standard, is a key component in data movement and development of new platforms for information sharing. So when we look at the data and what's coming into healthcare, as we noted in the previous slide, there's the systems of records, right? So we're always going to have a large amount of collected and digitized structured and unstructured clinical and billing claims data. However, much like digital transformation has overtaken other industries, healthcare is really kind of presented with a much larger universe of data to ingest and analyze and present than previously known. And this will include a lot of data sets around medically relevant data like genomics and protein expressions, a really new cutting edge, but going to generate a huge amount of data. And then also, we're starting to see a lot of unique information about patients generated by medical wearables, smart clothing, mobile apps that are specific to clinical space that really focus on collecting data from patients outside the hospital setting. And then lastly, we have exogenous data such as social media, environmental, location. More and more highly prevalent is the social determinants of health, which are now considered essential data sources in kind of understanding the patient's health journey. So as folks who work in this space, you're probably being asked to assimilate more and more information. And as this data moves beyond simple reporting, dashboards, and business intelligence, and towards really applying advanced analytics and machine learning algorithms, your internal customers want that deep and predictive findings so they can reduce operating costs and improve quality of care. And with better access to the right data at the right time, with the right analysis, the methods in which hospitals deliver care is going to be dramatically transformed. So who's driving on this, right? So it's largely going to be executives who traditionally business intelligence leaders, maybe even health IT, have really focused on retrospective analysis inside their organizations. And more, what you see, as you can see in this slide, I won't outline everything here, is much more emphasis on prediction, detection, and effective recommendations. You see this more in the clinical space as we're driving into pharmacy recommendations and so on. So in order to meet this demand, we see a lot of IT infrastructure and architects being challenged to provide a very robust platform with a wealth of diverse data now coming in from multiple sources, as we showed on the last slide. And they're going to need the scale to they need scale to manage this volume of data and the process required to produce the analytics quickly. And then also, you're going to want a variety of analytical tool sets to do the type of analysis needed for the organization. So this next slide is, so we speak about analytics, and I'll dive into the Azure environment here in the next section. But I wanted to leave you a little bit. We do make quite a lot of investments in analytics and machine learning, specifically in the healthcare space. We actually have healthcare engineering resources. So I wanted you to be aware that as we make those investments, whether it be natural language processing, conversational AI like the Microsoft Health Bot, or analyzing unstructured data like medical images. So I'll focus on that here. We have a project called InterEye. It's a research project that uses the state-of-the-art machine learning technology to do quantitative analysis of three-dimensional radiological images. So what we're trying to do here is automatically delineate tumors as well as healthy anatomy to really improve upon the manual mapping, the hours of meticulous preparation that radiologists and physicists go through to map and create a treatment plan for brain cancers as we see it today. If you are interested, you can go to the Project NRI website. There's some great videos there from physicians about how this speeds and improves their ability to, with radiation, not target healthy tissue. And all these algorithms are deployed through our Azure services. So as we kind of dive into the next session about Azure, recognize that these type of very specific high-end analytics in healthcare will be delivered into our Azure environment. So about Azure, and I think this is kind of a unique value proposition that Microsoft offers customers, is that we have the capabilities and that will allow you to really our customers demand for the platform. So first, productivity, right? We have more than 140 services, and I say that because it changes every day. I believe we're getting very close to 180 different services that are in the Azure environment. New ones get released every month, and older ones get improved upon. So, our objective is that any development tool or language or any DevOps opportunity, whether it be IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, can be developed within our environment. Secondly, Microsoft is, for the most part, a hybrid environment. A lot of the things that you see from an IT infrastructure standpoint can be delivered both on-premise and in the cloud. And we want to make sure that you can both, and that's not just for the optimization, like I said, of DevOps, databases, infrastructure, but also from a security and identity standpoint. Lastly, and we talked about this a little bit with the last slide, we're really working to develop breakthrough applications in healthcare with our built-in intelligence across the platform in terms of cognitive services and custom AI models. And then lastly, we support in the healthcare space HIPAA, high trust, FDA, CFR Part 11 for pharma customers, et cetera, FedRAMP moderate and high in certain environments. And so we believe that we will always strive to make sure that the table stakes of certifications are there for you. And then for those of you who are developing intellectual property, Microsoft really has a best in industry IP protection that we offer our customers. So I will not go through a deep dive of our technology here simply because Sam will get into a little bit of the architecture of Sentara data around their enterprise data warehouse. But I want you to understand really though from this slide is that the Azure platform has all the components needed including many, they're not shown here, like Hadoop and Spark, et cetera. I think Sam will speak to that a little bit, that facilitate the development of the data and analytic platform that you need in the modern healthcare organization. So although this is a simplistic diagram, largely driven by our platform as a service rather than infrastructure as a service. And as these components provide you scale and flexibility, you can either reproduce your on-site solution, if that's what you're comfortable with, or as we see more and more, customers are digitally transforming the entire process by using these platform as a service capabilities to improve the management and reduce the friction in the processing of data and analytics. And my last slide, before I hand it over to Sam, I wanted to give you a little flavor for what customers are doing with enterprise data warehouses and some of these components. I know a little bit of a busy slide. I'll let you kind of digest it here, but this is really around remote patient monitoring, a conversation I often have with children's hospitals. So as you can see on the far left, if you have a patient with pediatric asthma, we can take a simple ingestion of information from, say, an app that you've delivered to them, right? So we now know where the patient is from a location standpoint. And using location, say as an example, I said I worked in North Carolina. So if you're in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, often in the summer, you have a lot of code orange and code red alerts for pollution. Unfortunately, the Great Smokies suffers from a lot of pollution from the TVA. So respiratory patients, COPD or pediatric asthma patients, suffer unknowingly in those environments. So by knowing where they're located and being able to pull pollen or pollution alerts from weather services, we can send proactive notifications through the Azure environment directly to patients. And you may even have a more sophisticated solution where you may have a wireless or Bluetooth spirometer, and perhaps you want to give instructions to your more serious patients to actually do a lung function test and see where they are. You may want to recommend them to go to primary care or perhaps even stay inside for the day if the risk is really high. So a very simplistic solution that's kind of using, if you will, real-time unstructured data and also structured data. So all of the components from left to right live within the Azure environment. And as you learn what your patients are doing, their behaviors, patient experience, population health, all those are big initiatives that your hospital has, we can apply machine learning models to that, get smarter, and do a better job as we ingest more and more information. So that gives you a bigger picture of how data warehouses get lifted up into the healthcare environment. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam Owens, who can explain what they're doing at Sentara around this architecture. Sam?
Thanks, Sean. My name is Sam Owens. I'm a director here at Sentara Healthcare. Spent most of my career in healthcare, last 20 plus years here at Sentara. Probably the last 10, 12 years have been in data in some capacity. Have responsibilities for our data services here at Sentara across all of our divisions, whether that's provider, payer, and so forth. If you're not familiar with Sentara, we are a mid-sized IDN in the Mid-Atlantic with provider services primarily in Virginia and North Carolina. We operate 12 hospital facilities, medical groups that employ a little over 1,000 physicians, long-term care, home care, basically most anything to do with healthcare. We have a health plan with about 500,000 members. Our payer services extend out of the Mid-Atlantic into Ohio and other areas. We also operate a clinically integrated network with about 2,700 physicians, mostly across Virginia and some in North Carolina, and we provide data services to that group as well. So a little bit about our journey. I think we began really to see more and more value in data shortly after, or maybe around the same time as we implemented our EMR Epic beginning in 2007, 2008. I think our CIO at the time really kind of pressed us to, there's going to be a lot of valuable data coming out of that. We need to get ready for that. So as a byproduct of that, we implemented a data warehouse model. I'm cautious not to say an enterprise data warehouse model because we didn't really invest to kind of go enterprise-wide at that point. A lot of healthcare companies did, a lot of other companies did. We probably didn't invest heavily enough there. But that model, I think, we utilized for a number of years and provided value. I think probably in the 2016 timeframe, we began to feel the pain, if you will, of a traditional model, data warehouse model. We actually brought in Gartner at that time and looked at two things. One, the technology stack, which I'll focus on more today, but also our analytics delivery model here within Sentara. We were very dispersed and no coordination for our analysts across the company. And so as a byproduct of that engagement, we developed a consolidated model, a corporate-based analytics model where there's corporate governance, although there are a number of analytics groups that are part of that are deployed in the service lines and so forth. So kind of a hybrid model between a centralized model and a federated model. So also as a byproduct of that, we developed a technology roadmap. And so late 17, early 18, we began looking for an architect partner to help us develop through that roadmap. We identified CDS Tech as our partner, primarily because they have a significant healthcare experience and big data experience. And we started that project about a little over a year ago, probably summer of 2018. So I apologize, I skipped a slide. So from a business challenge perspective, I think healthcare, everyone who's in healthcare recognizes that there's a lot of transition going on. There's transition from fee-for-service to value-based care for population health, competition from kind of players that we didn't necessarily recognize probably a few years ago, CVS, Amazon, Google, and so forth. And so data has become much more valuable, and I think we have to know more about our customers, our services, capabilities, basically everything. So I think that's a huge driver for us. And I think we were very traditional, as I mentioned, around our data services. So not having kind of a consolidated platform where everything was in one place led to fragmentation, decentralized analytics. We were suffering from conflicting analysis and so forth. And so we kind of moved to what our key goals were, and probably one of the most significant goals is that very simple, hey, I want all of my data in one place. I think that was kind of resonating from our analytics community. So we set out to consolidate kind of some core data initially, clinical, financial, operational, customer, ultimately working toward any relevant data that we could have as part of our platform. I think another area that we really wanted to focus on is speed to market. And when I say speed to market, we would identify, or our analytics community or others identify new data, and in a traditional warehouse model, it takes a fair amount of time to get that exposed into the warehouse. So we needed a model that we could expose that data fairly quickly, and then basically organize and cleanse and move that through the process. So a huge goal for us. I think the other thing that we recognized was that we want to enrich our data. Not only the traditional data quality, data standardization, but we put together a strategy around mapping basically anything that we could map to a national standard, we would. So, the normal things like, meds to RxNorm or LOINC, or we use UMLS to traverse various standards, and FHIR for kind of things that are just, typical code sets. Additionally, we had been working with ontologies and taxonomies for a while, and so we looked at implementing some semantic tagging using some of those national and international taxonomies. And spatial analytics becoming a big deal for us, kind of knowing where our services are, where our patients are, and so forth. So we have implemented a GIS component of that as well. I think finally, the last major goal was around creating that customer view, that 360-degree view of our customer. That has been kind of eluding us. We have a lot of the data laying around, but it's not organized, and so that was a pretty significant goal for us. From a technology stack, I mentioned kind of the core data that we wanted to start with. We selected data from those systems to kind of help us flesh out the architecture kind of end to end. So again, we chose data from our Epic EMR, our billing, patient billing systems from both hospital and ambulatory health plan data, a lot of operational data from our HR and finance and so forth, as well as some data from, from our customer engagement mobile apps as those are being deployed. When we started the project, we actually started as an on-prem project. So we actually began to lay the architecture out as an on-prem. I think as we kind of went through that process, quickly determined that probably not a great idea in this kind of time frame. We quickly moved to adopt Azure as our platform. For our lake, we use Hadoop, and currently using Cloudera's distribution of Hadoop. CDS Tech, who I mentioned as our architect vendor, has an accelerator I'll talk a little bit more about called HScale, which we utilize that. And for our warehouse, we adopted the unified data model from IBM. We're using their dimensional model. So from a project perspective, I mentioned the identified systems, and we primarily ingest those data from from those systems. Most of those data are discrete. We did pull in a lot of physician notes. We have plans to pull in additional non-structured data as well as some images. We have a lot of our images are already in Azure in a separate project, and we will be able to access those from the platform, but we actually will pull some over into the platform for specific analysis. The data that comes in, we basically leave that data in our lake as it is in whatever schema that it came in, if it had a schema. I mentioned the Citius Tech HScale Accelerator. We use that for data quality and data standardization, as well as some data transformation. I mentioned semantic tagging. We use graph databases to do that, currently using AllegroGraph, also working and looking at Cosmos DB as a potential there as we move more and more to cloud. So we're fairly early in the use of graph, but I think the ability to identify relationships within our data and then feed that back into the platform is a key component. I mentioned GIS. Esri is probably our key component there, as well as another small product called Geocodia that we use to geotag our data. From our customer engagement, we ingest data from our mobile app. We're working to also collect data from our beacons in our facilities to help with patient flow and streamline wayfinding and so forth. As a byproduct of the platform and for our data scientists, we have a sandbox approach where they can take data from the platform and some of their own data, if necessary, kind of blend that in a protected environment and basically have their way with the data as they need to. I think, also from the platform perspective, I mentioned the Customer 360. Again, using HScale, we're conforming the data to the IBM dimensional model for our warehouse. We'll continue to expand that. We just have the first release of that just went live a few weeks ago. And that's our primary warehouse use case. We will likely add additional use cases or different domains of data that are not necessarily customer related, but we intend to flesh that model out as a dimensional model for our warehouse. I think from a learnings perspective, a number of things that come to mind. One was the partner that we picked. In looking, we looked at a number of vendors, large and small, from the big six, so to speak, to some boutique vendors. Citius, I think, was a sweet spot for us with the experience that they brought to the table. Their accelerator, I think, was a great find. We didn't necessarily start out looking for a company that had an accelerator product that would help us, but that helped us get into the game without having to do massive Spark development or any other sort of development. One of the things that we tried to do as we went through the process of standing up the platform is stay away from getting locked in on just a handful of use cases. And that's, typically what you do is when you start something like this, okay, what is it we're trying to solve? And we did some of that, but we tried to do those in broad swaths. What are the areas of interest for the company based on corporate strategy and analytics community? And I think that served us well. I think our platform is broad enough initially to provide significant value, and we'll continue to flesh that as we move forward. I think the data that we selected to flesh that out did provide value, has provided value, and I think we're building on that as we see. I mentioned semantic tagging. I think some of our initial work there was around pharmacy data with NDFRT and UMLS, creating some additional value for our customers. One of the challenges we've had with some of those types of enhancements is kind of getting that out into the analytics community. It's data that they haven't had access to previously, and trying to work through, gaining confidence in that data. Probably one of the biggest lessons learned we had is being new to the cloud. Security and privacy, I think it was mentioned earlier. That took much longer than we anticipated, working through iterations to get privacy and security comfortable. I think putting all of your data, PHI and so forth, in the cloud made everybody very nervous, and so we went through a fairly methodical approach to do that, and I think we're very comfortable with what we have in Azure at this point. I think as most data projects, it's key to have a good partnership with the customers and our analytics community. I mentioned that we consolidated those in prior engagements. That's been a huge help. They actually run governance for us. They're not part of IT. They're through our physician executive, and had a great partnership with them from the outset. So I think that is another I think key to success. Someone mentioned, I think early in the presentation, and that's architect the data strategy to allow for evolution in technologies. I think when we started this, as I mentioned, we started as an on-prem solution. We moved to the cloud. We probably had a couple of starts there just trying to figure out how to work that. We have a larger cloud strategy within the company here, so we weren't necessarily the first ones going, but we were the first 2 or 3 solutions that we actually put in the cloud, and are recognizing that with the rapid advancements in Azure and other cloud partners, the cloud technologies are probably going to change. If we can get something to last 2 or 3 years, I think that's about as far as a horizon that we can count on. I think the architecture that we have will transcend technology changes, and maybe and hopefully will allow us to take advantage of some of those technology changes as the cloud continues to become more and more robust. Just a quick slide on the actual architecture. I didn't want to get real deep in it, but just to give you an idea, we we move data from on-prem and other sources into our cloud landing zone, which is in AWS in Azure. The data are raw at that point and file-based source format. Affectionately, we refer to this as the deep end of the lake, and so we have fairly few people, a few scientists will enter into this zone. We then take the data and we enrich it, as we talked about, data quality, data standardization, other enrichments. We also flatten it out into kind of an end-state view with the imposed schema of whatever system that we receive the data from, and allow access to our larger analytic community, and have a pretty significant adoption here, even though the data are not necessarily conformed to a model, and kind of refer to that as a shallow end of the lake, if you will. But then from there, we use HScale to transform the data into the IBM dimensional model. One of the other things that Citius brought to the table is a lot of experience with models, and in particular with the unified data model for healthcare. So that was a big win for us, and that's kind of our warehouse approach. So from a value perspective, I think it's been hugely valuable for our company and our analytic community who supports decision making, having access to much deeper data around our health plan members, 500,000, and they are in a huge growth mode, trying to get to over 1 million members within the next couple of years. So data is just really key for them. I don't know how many billions of rows. I think it's probably, the slide here says 24 billion. I think it's much more than that now. In terms of clinical data, just huge amounts of clinical data that we are capturing and providing for the customers. Hundreds and hundreds of data quality rules. I think at the time we did the slide 900, it's probably more than that at this point. And again, HScale was key in helping us to be able to do that in an effective way. So Some of these data the analysts had access to previously, but what they didn't have was the ability to combine the data. And so, for instance, a lot of our pop health initiatives, which in a lot of cases stem from our health plan, they struggle to take the health plan data and compare that with provider data from our EMR. And so now they have the ability to do that, which is hugely valuable for them, particularly as we get more and more risk-based pop health type contracts. So I think the customer is seeing huge value there. And as a byproduct of that, we've seen pretty significant growth in the number of dashboards they're building, several hundred, using all domains of data that we have. We have a few models that the customers have built using data from our EDP, our enterprise data platform, both internally, and we also use some external vendors, and we ship data or let them access data for various types of models that they're working on. I mentioned a key element was time to market, a key goal, and I think we feel very good about where we are. Obviously, getting data into the lake can be very quick, can be a day or two depending on complexity. Migrating it all the way through the process up to the warehouse does take longer. However, as we are doing that and we're select data to actually load in our warehouse, the customers have access to the data in the lake. So from their perspective, they are getting the best of both worlds, and I think they're very happy with that. I think there's an anticipation that they will use our data lake probably as much as they use our warehouse, just because we can get data there quickly, and we don't migrate all data from our data lake up to our warehouse, only the data that we can conform, and they actually, from a governance perspective, help identify and prioritize what we flesh out. I think one of the key goals that we met was one place for all of our data. I think that was a key component, and I think the customers are seeing that now, that they have one platform, one mechanism in Azure that they can access data. And I think as we flesh out additional data sources, additional data from existing sources, both from internal and external sources, I think they are excited about that, and our adoption, I think, has been very good. So I think that is all of my slides. I will turn it back over to Susan.
Thank you, and thank you to Sam, Sean, and Jeff for a wonderful presentation. I want to remind those in the audience that you can submit questions using the Ask a Question panel on your screen. So let's start with our first question. If you were starting now, what would you do differently? I think this might be for Sam.
Sure. I mentioned that our project has kind of evolved. We started out as an on-prem project, and I mentioned our Hadoop implementation, and that is an IaaS model currently. One of the things that I think we have learned is that taking advantage of some of the cloud-native capability, one in particular that we are struggling with in an IaaS model is dynamic compute. And I probably didn't really even understand what that was when we started the project, but as we're working through that, taking advantage of some of the capabilities that are there are really key. And we're already looking at what's the next evolution of our platform, utilizing some of the technology in Azure, SQL Data Warehouse, other components, Databricks, and so forth. And so I think that's probably a big lessons learned, that I think, an IaaS model, we did get it to the cloud, but we probably aren't able to have the agility that we need, and also manage performance and cost at a level that we would really like to.
Okay, thank you. Sam, this question is also for you. How long did it take I can't read how it's worded. How long did it take from the time you began to product selection to first use?
Okay, let's see. Well, it wouldn't necessarily be from product selection. Probably, I would say I'm going to start from our architect selection, and I would say that was probably close to 12 months. But I will say that a significant portion of that was working through a lot of the cloud implementation. So I don't believe we probably spent probably 6 or 7 months actually building out we got to the data lake, and the data lake was the first component that we implemented, which was December, January of this year. So probably 6, 7 months if you don't have to work through, because we were new to the cloud and we had to work through some things for the first time. So I think that took probably an extra 5 or 6 months, which I mentioned earlier. It took a lot longer than we anticipated originally.
Okay, and this one has to do with cloud security. Can you talk a little bit about cloud security? Expand on that.
Well, I won't be able to get probably into a lot of the details, but we work with very closely with our CISO and team, as well as our privacy officer and privacy managers, in building out the hosting in Azure. I think we went through a lot of iterations on how to host subscriptions and how to allow access, where to allow access from, to the footprint that the data platform has. And they're very tight. So, initially we have it locked down, or did have it locked down to, very, very close, on-prem resources, no off-site access to the platform. We're working through that, and I think we're allowing that. Once you get into the platform, we have your traditional role-based security. I think we did run into some things. Obviously there's HIPAA with minimum necessary, and that's a tough one when we have corporate level analytic services. We have some other contracts and so forth. There are some idiosyncrasies between payers and providers that certain data is not shareable at all, revenue, for instance. And so, we had to plan some of that into the way that we actually deployed the data. So, I think there's two big components: the actual protection of the data within the cloud, and that's probably not the expert to speak on that, but that's a huge deal. I spent lots of time working on that with the cloud team and with Microsoft, quite honestly, kind of fine tuning that.
Okay. Sam, this question is also for you. The person asks, when Sam uses the word customer, who are his customers? Are they providers, coders? Are they within his system, or are there others?
So our initial set of customers and our sponsors are, in large part, our analytics community. So I mentioned the reorganization of our analysts, and I don't remember exactly how many. There's probably 150 or so, in a consolidated group, as well as finance and some other areas. There are folks outside of that as well in departments. For instance, like cardiac has individuals who access data. We provide the data services. I don't necessarily provide the end solutions, so I don't provide dashboards and reports and so forth. But our customers, which are the analysts, there are some report writers that do some work against the platform, and data scientists are our primary customers. I guess I will expand that a little bit. We do provide data to our mobile app, so we push data to them. Things like physician office schedules and so forth that the app needs to consume. So in an indirect way, the data gets out to the customer that way, but that they don't have any hands-on.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, Sentara mentioned that they are an Epic customer. Have you incorporated any of Epic EDW Caboodle solution into your architecture or data feeds?
So we do have the whole Cogito stack, Clarity, Caboodle, Slicer, Dicer, and we do utilize that, but it is not part of our enterprise data platform. One of the things that, and there's a couple of different ways to look at that. Epic would like you to kind of bring all of your data into Caboodle and use them as your platform. We have chosen kind of keep arm's length from Epic from that perspective. So we do utilize those tools where appropriate, but it is not part of our data platform. We do take data from them, from both Clarity and Caboodle, and bring that into the platform, but they are not part of the architecture that we're talking about here today.
Okay, thank you. The next question is also around the data model. Regarding use of the data model for Customer 360, what areas do you plan to expand to in the near or midterm?
Ooh, that's a good one. So we started out with the kind of the traditional things, you know, the patients and members and all of the things that flow down from there, encounters and all the clinical data. We are working, looking at our CRM. We have a CRM strategy that's tightly coupled with our customer engagement on our mobile digital app, so we're working through there as well. And someone mentioned social data that's out there, and we have not brought that into the platform yet, but we will be bringing that in, and as much as we can, linking that to our Customer 360. So those are things that are kind of on the near term. I think some of the longer term things, well, maybe not that long. Some of the IoT things, we do a lot of that. We obviously have a lot of devices inside of our facilities. I think our health plan also has devices they provide to members, and so beginning to pick up some of that data will be, on the near-term horizon.
Okay. And what do insurance companies think about what you're doing? Are they on board? Are there concerns?
So our insurance company, we have an insurance company, Optima, which is a payer, and they are definitely on board. They have a lot of data. They're a big consumer of data. So probably the biggest benefit I think I mentioned earlier for our health plan was getting richer clinical data. We had been sending clinical data to them for HEDIS measures and so forth for a number of years, but their ability to close gaps is easier when they can get much more direct access to data, and they feed it into any number of systems that they have that do risk analysis and even fraud detection and so forth.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we do have to wrap up. Again, thank you to Sam, Sean, and Jeff for such a great presentation. Thank you to our audience, and I would like to invite the audience to complete the evaluation. At the end of today's event, please share your thoughts with us. And as a reminder, today's session will be available on demand for 1 year through the HIMSS Learning Center. And I wish everyone a great day.